Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the Islamic SHAHADA channel. In the heart of the American Southwest lies New Mexico, the Land of Enchantment, a place of vast deserts, red mesas, and golden light where silence feels sacred and time moves gently. Here, spirituality breathes through the wind and the mountains, not only through rituals or walls. For centuries, New Mexico has been a meeting ground of cultures: Native, Spanish, Mexican, and Anglo. Among these layers of belief, another quiet story has taken root: the story of Islam. Islam did not arrive here with conquest or numbers, but through reflection, carried by travelers, immigrants, and seekers drawn to the desert's peace. In its stillness, they found a faith that speaks of harmony, humility, and oneness with the divine. Long before New Mexico became part of the United States, even before the borders of Spain's colonial empire reached this land, there are whispers that Islam may have already touched the soil of the American Southwest. Historians and researchers have long debated these possibilities, that Muslim sailors and explorers from North Africa or Andalusia may have ventured across the Atlantic as early as the 16th century, joining or even preceding Spanish expeditions into the New World. While concrete evidence remains elusive, the theory is not entirely far-fetched. At the time, Spain was emerging from nearly 8 centuries of Muslim rule under Al-Andalus. Many of the sailors who navigated Spain's early colonial ships were of Moorish or African descent, men who had inherited the maritime knowledge and scientific sophistication of the Islamic Golden Age. Some may have carried fragments of their faith across the ocean, quietly embedded in their language, art, and worldview. This influence, though subtle, left its marks in unexpected ways. The Spanish colonists who arrived in New Mexico brought with them architectural styles, irrigation systems, and cultural aesthetics shaped by centuries of Islamic civilization. The iconic adobe architecture of the Southwest, with its geometric symmetry, courtyards, and domed ceilings, bears echoes of Andalusian and North African design. Even the very concept of blending earth, water, and sun to build sustainable homes was deeply rooted in Moorish engineering. However, the visible presence of Islam in New Mexico would not re-emerge until centuries later, in the modern era. During the 20th century, a new wave of Muslims began arriving in the Southwest. Some were students from the Middle East and South Asia who came to study at universities in Albuquerque, Las Cruces, and Santa Fe. Others were professionals, doctors, engineers, and academics drawn by the region's research institutions and calm environment. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, these small communities began to organize. One of the most significant milestones came in 1980 with the founding of the Dar Al-Islam Foundation in Abiquiú, a small desert town north of Santa Fe. Conceived as both a spiritual retreat and an educational center, Dar Al-Islam became one of the first purpose-built Islamic complexes in the United States. Its mosque, designed by the renowned Egyptian architect Hassan Fathi, stands as a masterpiece of adobe architecture, merging Islamic aesthetics with the natural landscape of New Mexico. Dar al-Islam was not just a place of worship, it represented a philosophy. It embodied the idea that Islam could harmonize with the environment and culture of the American Southwest, that the desert itself could be a place of divine reflection. For many visitors and converts, the serenity of Abiquiú echoed the stillness of the Arabian desert, reminding them that faith and nature are inseparable. From the possible Moorish echoes of the 16th century to the deliberate creation of Dar al-Islam in the 1980s, Islam's presence in New Mexico has followed an unusual path, quiet, reflective, and deeply connected to the land. In a region defined by its mix of histories, Native, Spanish, and Anglo, Islam became yet another thread in the intricate tapestry of New Mexico's identity. Its story may have begun in whispers, but those echoes have endured, carried by the desert wind, reminding us that faith often travels in silence before it is finally seen. By the late 20th century, the quiet spiritual presence that once lingered in New Mexico's deserts began to take visible form. From the 1990s onward, Muslim communities across the state experienced gradual yet meaningful growth, not through mass migration or political movements, but through education, family, and faith. The city of Albuquerque, New Mexico's largest urban center, became the heart of this development. During the 1990s, students, professionals, and immigrants from Egypt, Pakistan, India, Turkey, and North Africa began settling here, drawn by the University of New Mexico and the region's expanding opportunities in science, medicine, and engineering. Alongside them were American converts, people inspired by Islam's spiritual depth, its emphasis on reflection, and its harmony with the natural world. This growing diversity culminated in a pivotal moment with the establishment of the Islamic Center of New Mexico, ICNM, in Albuquerque. Founded in 1980 and expanded during the 1990s, ICNM became the state's oldest and most influential mosque, not just a place of worship, but a cultural and educational institution. Within its walls, Friday prayers brought together hundreds of worshipers from every background imaginable: Arab, South Asian, African, Hispanic, and American-born Muslims, reflecting the pluralism that defines Islam in the United States. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, other communities began to emerge. In Las Cruces, near the Mexican border, a small but active Muslim population established the Southern New Mexico Islamic Center, serving both students from New Mexico State University and families in the region. In Santa Fe, known for its artistic and spiritual openness, Muslim residents created informal prayer groups and later small masjids that blended local adobe architecture with Islamic design, a visual symbol of how faith adapts to its environment. The post-9/11 era posed new challenges, yet also strengthened these communities. Facing waves of misunderstanding and suspicion, New Mexico's Muslims responded with openness. They invited neighbors, journalists, and clergy to their mosques, initiating interfaith dialogues that would come to define the tone of Islam in the state: calm, inclusive, and educational. The ICNM became a hub for such exchanges, hosting public lectures, charity drives, and open house days to demystify Islam for the wider public. Over time, a new generation of Muslims, born and raised in New Mexico, began to shape their own identity. They balanced American values of freedom and individuality with Islamic ethics of humility, service, and devotion. These young Muslims pursued careers as doctors, teachers, and engineers, while also organizing cultural festivals, volunteering in local shelters, and participating in civic life. For them, Islam was not a distant heritage but a living faith, something that coexisted naturally with New Mexico's multicultural soul. In their lives, one can see a synthesis of East and West, of tradition and modernity, of prayer and progress. Today, the mosques of Albuquerque, Las Cruces, and Santa Fe stand as more than religious institutions. They are community anchors, educational centers, and bridges of understanding. They represent a quiet but enduring transformation, the rise of a Muslim presence rooted not in power, but in belonging. At the center of New Mexico's vast desert landscape lies Albuquerque, a city where tradition and transformation meet. Known for its blend of Native American, Hispanic, and Anglo cultures, Albuquerque has also become the beating heart of Islam in the American Southwest. Here, amid the mountains and sun-baked mesas, faith quietly thrives. The story of Islam in Albuquerque begins in the early 1980s with the founding of the Islamic Center of New Mexico, ICNM. What started as a small prayer group among university students and immigrant families soon evolved into one of the most significant Muslim institutions in the region. Built from the vision of inclusivity and service, ICNM became a mosque, a school, a community hub, and a symbol of coexistence. Today, the Muslim population in Albuquerque is estimated to exceed 5,000 people, representing a tapestry of backgrounds: Arabs, South Asians, Africans, African Americans, Hispanics, converts, and refugees. They come together under one roof for Friday prayers, Ramadan gatherings, weddings, and community dinners. Inside ICNM, the hum of many languages, Urdu, Arabic, English, Somali, and Spanish, reflects a global faith rooted in local soil. For decades, ICNM has played a vital role not only in religious life, but in social and civic engagement. It hosts open houses, blood drives, and interfaith dialogues, welcoming neighbors from churches, synagogues, and temples across Albuquerque. Its message is simple: that Islam is not foreign to America's moral landscape, but part of it. However, in 2022, this peaceful narrative was shaken by a tragedy that reverberated far beyond New Mexico. Between July and August of that year, 4 Muslim men were murdered in Albuquerque, all from the same community. The killing sparked fear and grief across the state and quickly drew national attention. At first, suspicion fell on hate crimes targeting Muslims. Yet, when the investigation unfolded, the truth proved more complex and more painful. The suspect, arrested shortly after, was himself a Muslim, reportedly motivated by personal grievances and sectarian tensions. The 2022 Albuquerque shootings became a moment of deep reflection, not only for Muslims in New Mexico, but for Muslim communities nationwide. It revealed internal fractures and underscored the importance of unity, understanding, and communication within the Ummah. Yet amid the sorrow, something powerful emerged: solidarity. The city of Albuquerque, led by Mayor Tim Keller, responded swiftly, increasing security near mosques, organizing interfaith vigils, and publicly standing with the Muslim community. Faith leaders from churches, synagogues, and temples joined in mourning, demonstrating that tragedy could also forge compassion. An attack on one faith is an attack on all faiths, became the city's message. In the aftermath, ICNM strengthened its commitment to safety, education, and bridge building. It launched new interfaith initiatives, expanded youth mentorship programs, and partnered with law enforcement to ensure the protection of its congregants. The mosque now works closely with civic organizations to host public education events about Islam, addressing misconceptions and promoting dialogue. By 2025, Albuquerque's Muslim community continues to evolve, younger, more active, and more visible than ever. At the University of New Mexico, UNM, Muslim student associations are thriving, organizing cultural nights, interfaith panels, and community service projects. Muslim academics and entrepreneurs are contributing to the city's economy and cultural life, while a new generation begins to enter local politics, representing the voice of an increasingly diverse New Mexico. In the northern reaches of New Mexico, where the high desert meets the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, lies a landscape that seems to breathe spirituality. This is Santa Fe and Abiquiú, regions where silence itself feels sacred, and where Islam has found a home not in numbers, but in depth. Santa Fe, long known as a haven for artists, seekers, and spiritual explorers, holds one of the smallest yet most vibrant Muslim communities in the state, roughly 500 people. Despite their small population, Santa Fe's Muslims have earned a reputation for deep engagement in interfaith work, cultural dialogue, and education. The local mosque, modest in size, functions less as an isolated religious space and more as an open door to conversation, hosting discussions on ethics, spirituality, and social harmony. Here, Islam in Santa Fe thrives in the intersection between faith and art, prayer and creativity. The city's broader culture, with its emphasis on meditation, indigenous wisdom, and ecological balance, creates fertile ground for the spiritual dimensions of Islam to unfold. For many, this community represents a unique expression of American Islam, peaceful, reflective, and deeply intertwined with the landscape itself. Just an hour north of Santa Fe lies Abiquiú, home to one of the most extraordinary landmarks of Islam in the United States, the Dar Al-Islam Foundation. Founded in the early 1980s, Dar Al-Islam stands as both a mosque and a spiritual retreat, overlooking the Chama River Valley with its rolling hills and ochre mesas. The mosque, designed by the world-renowned Egyptian architect Hassan Fathi, is a masterpiece of Adobe architecture, a seamless fusion of traditional Islamic design and the natural elements of New Mexico's desert. Dar al-Islam was more than a construction project. It was a vision, an attempt to harmonize Islam with the American landscape, both physically and spiritually. From its inception, the foundation sought to create a place of learning, contemplation, and dialogue, where Muslims and non-Muslims alike could explore the essence of faith in an environment free from noise and distraction. Since the 1980s, Dar al-Islam has hosted Islamic studies courses, Quran classes, youth retreats, and interfaith gatherings. Scholars, teachers, and visitors from across the United States, and even abroad, have come here to reflect on spirituality, community, and purpose. Its programs are not limited to theology. They explore Islam's relationship with environment, education, and art, fostering a holistic approach to faith. In 2025, Dar al-Islam continues to serve as a living institution, adapting to the needs of modern Muslims while remaining true to its contemplative roots. Among its most notable initiatives are the Living Islam Retreats, immersive programs designed to help participants experience Islam as a lived spiritual path through study, prayer, and connection with nature. Another cornerstone is the Teacher Development Workshop Series, aimed at training educators who teach Islamic studies in schools across the American Southwest. In the northern reaches of New Mexico, where the high desert meets the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, lies a landscape that seems to breathe spirituality. This is Santa Fe and Abiquiú, regions where silence itself feels sacred, and where Islam has found a home not in numbers, but in depth. Santa Fe, long known as a haven for artists, seekers, and spiritual explorers, holds one of the smallest yet most vibrant Muslim communities in the state, roughly 500 people. Despite their small population, Santa Fe's Muslims have earned a reputation for deep engagement in interfaith work, cultural dialogue, and education. The local mosque, modest in size, functions less as an isolated religious space and more as an open door to conversation, hosting discussions on ethics, spirituality, and social harmony. Here, Islam in Santa Fe thrives in the intersection between faith and art, prayer and creativity. The city's broader culture, with its emphasis on meditation, indigenous wisdom, and ecological balance, creates fertile ground for the spiritual dimensions of Islam to unfold. For many, this community represents a unique expression of American Islam, peaceful, reflective, and deeply intertwined with the landscape itself. Just an hour north of Santa Fe lies Abiquiú, home to one of the most extraordinary landmarks of Islam in the United States, the Dar Al-Islam Foundation. Founded in the early 1980s, Dar al-Islam stands as both a mosque and a spiritual retreat, overlooking the Chama River Valley with its rolling hills and ochre mesas. The mosque, designed by the world-renowned Egyptian architect Hassan Fathi, is a masterpiece of Adobe architecture, a seamless fusion of traditional Islamic design and the natural elements of New Mexico's desert. Dar al-Islam was more than a construction project. It was a vision, an attempt to harmonize Islam with the American landscape, both physically and spiritually. From its inception, the foundation sought to create a place of learning, contemplation, and dialogue, where Muslims and non-Muslims alike could explore the essence of faith in an environment free from noise and distraction. Since the 1980s, Dar al-Islam has hosted Islamic studies courses, Quran classes, youth retreats, and interfaith gatherings. Scholars, teachers, and visitors from across the United States, and even abroad, have come here to reflect on spirituality, community, and purpose. Its programs are not limited to theology. They explore Islam's relationship with environment, education, and art, fostering a holistic approach to faith. In 2025, Dar Al-Islam continues to serve as a living institution, adapting to the needs of modern Muslims while remaining true to its contemplative roots. Among its most notable initiatives are the Living Islam Retreats, immersive programs designed to help participants experience Islam as a lived spiritual path through study, prayer, and connection with nature. Another cornerstone is the Teacher Development Workshop Series, aimed at training educators who teach Islamic studies in schools across the American Southwest. In New Mexico, the Muslim community may be small in number, but its influence within the state's social and political landscape has been quietly growing. Over the past 2 decades, Muslims across the Land of Enchantment have moved beyond being simply a religious minority. They have become participants in shaping the moral and civic conversation of the state. The early Muslim settlers in New Mexico, many arriving as students, physicians, and engineers in the late 20th century, initially focused on establishing mosques and community centers. Political engagement was modest, often limited to local interfaith dialogues and charity work. But as national conversations about Islam intensified after 9/11, Muslims in New Mexico began to realize the importance of visibility and representation in the public sphere. New Mexico's government, to its credit, has long cultivated a relatively open and inclusive stance toward minority faiths. The state's history of multiculturalism, rooted in Native American, Hispanic, and Anglo traditions, created a civic culture more accepting of religious diversity. Albuquerque and Santa Fe, the 2 major urban centers, became hubs of interfaith cooperation. Local councils, such as the Interfaith Leadership Alliance of Santa Fe, regularly include Muslim representatives, ensuring that Islam has a voice in public ethics discussions, social outreach programs, and community development projects. In Albuquerque, the Islamic Center and Muslim student associations at the University of New Mexico have become platforms not only for religious education, but also for civic engagement. Young Muslims increasingly participate in public forums, voter registration drives, and environmental campaigns. This generational shift reflects a broader transformation from quiet community building toward active participation in public life. The political climate following 9/11 brought both challenges and opportunities. On one hand, Muslims across the state experienced moments of suspicion and stereotyping. Yet on the other, these pressures fostered resilience and unity. Muslim leaders began collaborating with local churches, synagogues, and native spiritual groups to counter Islamophobia and promote understanding. They organized open mosque days, cultural festivals, and educational initiatives, helping demystify Islam in the eyes of the broader public. During the COVID-19 pandemic, this cooperative spirit deepened. Muslim organizations worked alongside state and local authorities to distribute food, medical supplies, and public health information. This practical engagement highlighted Islam's ethical emphasis on service and community welfare, aligning perfectly with New Mexico's broader culture of solidarity. By 2025, the landscape has changed significantly. A new generation of Muslim professionals, teachers, environmental scientists, social workers, and lawyers has emerged as an articulate and visible force in civic life. Many are second-generation New Mexicans, fluent in both the traditions of their faith and the rhythms of local society. They bring Islamic values into contemporary issues, advocating for social justice, promoting sustainable living, and defending the rights of marginalized groups. Muslim youth groups have become active in environmental activism, reflecting the Quranic principle of stewardship of the earth, Khalifa. Initiatives in Albuquerque and Las Cruces include tree planting campaigns, renewable energy workshops, and collaborations with Native American communities on water conservation, issues deeply tied to New Mexico's identity as a desert state. The political engagement of Muslims in New Mexico today is not primarily about party politics. It is about presence and participation. It is about being seen and heard in classrooms, at city council meetings, and in community service. It is about asserting that Islam, as lived by New Mexicans, is not foreign to American life, but a vital thread in its diverse social fabric. In a time when national politics often polarize identity, New Mexico offers a different example. One where faith is not a dividing line, but a shared foundation for civic virtue. The Muslims of New Mexico are not simply observers of democracy. They are its active contributors, proving that even in small numbers, conviction and compassion can carry remarkable political power. In 2025, the Muslim community in New Mexico stands at a fascinating crossroads, facing enduring challenges while embracing new opportunities that redefine what it means to live as a Muslim in America's Southwest. Despite being small in number, Muslims in New Mexico continue to navigate a social landscape marked by both acceptance and misunderstanding. Islamophobia, though less overt than in some larger states, remains an undercurrent in local politics and media narratives. For many Muslims, particularly those in smaller towns beyond Albuquerque or Santa Fe, subtle discrimination persists in schools, workplaces, and public life. It is not hostility in the open sense, but a quiet alienation. The puzzled looks, the mispronounced names, the assumptions shaped by global headlines rather than local relationships. One of the community's most persistent challenges remains the lack of formal Islamic educational infrastructure. While major cities like Albuquerque host vibrant Islamic centers, smaller Muslim populations in Las Cruces, Farmington, or Roswell often depend on online resources and visiting scholars to sustain their spiritual learning. Parents express concern that their children grow up without access to structured Islamic education, a concern shared by many rural Muslim families across the United States. As a response, a growing number of parents and educators have begun forming informal weekend schools and online Quran study groups, connecting through digital platforms that bridge physical distance with shared purpose. Media representation also remains limited. Local newspapers and television networks rarely feature Muslim perspectives unless connected to international events or interfaith ceremonies. This lack of visibility, however, has inspired a new generation of Muslim storytellers, vloggers, and writers in New Mexico to take narrative ownership. Through podcasts, short films, and community blogs, they portray Islam not as a foreign religion, but as a lived experience woven into the state's multicultural identity, a faith that belongs to the deserts, the mesas, and the mountain air of New Mexico. Yet, amid these challenges, there are signs of remarkable renewal. The digital age has transformed how New Mexico's Muslims interact, not only with each other, but with the wider public. Online khutbahs, interfaith webinars, and cultural exchange forums have flourished since the pandemic, allowing Muslims from different corners of the state to stay connected, share resources, and build solidarity. This new digital ecosystem has also empowered converts, or reverts as many prefer, who often begin their spiritual journey through online exposure to Islam. Indeed, one of the most striking developments of recent years has been the steady growth of new Muslim converts in New Mexico. Many of them are local residents, Native Americans, Hispanic New Mexicans, and Anglo Americans, drawn by Islam's emphasis on simplicity, spirituality, and moral clarity. Their stories reflect a uniquely New Mexican form of Islam, one that blends the stillness of the desert with the universality of faith. Mosques have responded by developing mentorship programs and cultural orientation sessions to support these new Muslims, ensuring that their journey of faith is not a solitary one. Meanwhile, environmental consciousness has become an emerging priority for Muslim institutions. Several mosques, including the Islamic Center of New Mexico, ICNM, in Albuquerque, and the Southern New Mexico Islamic Center, CNMIC, in Las Cruces, have adopted the Green Mosque initiative. Solar panels, water-saving ablution systems, and eco-friendly community gardens are now integrated into mosque life. This movement is inspired by the Islamic concept of stewardship, khilafah, reflecting a deeper moral link between faith and environmental responsibility. The year 2025 also marks a turning point in social outreach. Two major community programs have gained prominence: the Food for All campaign, which provides free meals and grocery support to low-income families regardless of religion, and the Ramadan Open House, an annual event inviting neighbors of all backgrounds to share in the experience of breaking fast together. Both initiatives, led by ICNM and SNMIC, have become symbols of interfaith unity and compassion in practice, reminders that Islam in New Mexico is not just about identity, but service. Today, the Muslims of New Mexico continue to write a story that is both humble and hopeful. A story of endurance amid isolation, of renewal through community, and of faith that quietly transforms its surroundings. They may not yet have the institutional power or media presence of larger Muslim populations, but their contribution lies elsewhere, in the quiet dignity of service, in the resilience of belief, and in the conviction that Islam, even in the remote deserts of the American Southwest, can flourish as a living force for good. In New Mexico, faith moves quietly, like the wind that drifts across the high desert, unseen yet deeply felt. Islam here is not a loud proclamation, nor a political statement. It is a way of life that finds beauty in simplicity and strength in silence. Among the mountains and mesas, in cities and small towns alike, the story of Islam in the Land of Enchantment unfolds as one of harmony, between people, between faiths, and between the human soul and the vastness of creation. To understand Islam in New Mexico is to understand its landscape. The desert is not barren as outsiders might think. It is alive, breathing through the rustle of sagebrush, through the calls of distant birds, through the endless horizon that humbles the heart. In this silence, Muslims in New Mexico find a mirror of their own spiritual journey. Just as the desert conceals its life beneath the surface, Islam here thrives quietly beneath the noise of modern life. It does not seek to conquer, but to illuminate, not to dominate, but to balance. From Abiquiú to Las Cruces, from Santa Fe to Albuquerque, the Muslim experience is one of deep reflection, shaped by faith, community, and a profound respect for the land. In Abiquiú, the adobe domes of Dar Al-Islam rise like a whisper from the earth itself, a sanctuary built not in opposition to the world, but in harmony with it. The architecture of Hassan Fathi speaks to a timeless truth, that beauty can be both human and divine when shaped by intention and humility. There, Muslims gather not just to study Islam, but to live it, through retreats, through teaching, through shared silence beneath the desert sky. In Albuquerque, the Islamic Center stands as a living pulse of the state's Muslim presence. The call to prayer echoes softly among the city streets, a reminder that Islam is woven into the fabric of New Mexico's identity. In Las Cruces, faith takes root in the minds of students, professors, and families who see no divide between knowledge and belief. And in Santa Fe, Islam becomes part of a larger spiritual dialogue, where Sufis, Christians, Buddhists, and seekers of all paths gather to explore the meaning of transcendence in a world that often forgets how to listen. The Muslims of New Mexico, immigrants, converts, and descendants of early settlers, have built a faith that reflects the state's essence: resilient, warm, and contemplative. They live between cultures, but not in conflict with them. Here, to be Muslim is to be both local and universal, to face Mecca while standing in awe of the Sangre de Cristo mountains, to fast through long summer days while feeling the quiet rhythm of the desert's breath. This is the Land of Enchantment, not merely because of its landscapes, but because of the way it invites the soul to slow down, to reflect, to be still. It is in this stillness that Islam finds its voice. The desert teaches patience, it teaches humility, It reminds the believer that everything transient, power, wealth, even struggle, eventually returns to dust. What remains is faith. What endures is sincerity. For many Muslims here, faith is not measured by numbers or institutions, but by presence, by the way they live, serve, and coexist. They open their mosques to strangers, their tables to neighbors, and their hearts to dialogue. In a world increasingly divided by fear, they offer a model of coexistence rooted in spiritual maturity. New Mexico's story of Islam is not one of conquest or conversion. It is a story of coexistence and quiet endurance. It is the story of how Islam adapts, not by losing itself, but by reflecting the light of divine truth through the prism of culture and place. As the sun sets over the Rio Grande, the land glows in hues of gold and crimson. And in that glow, one can sense something timeless, the meeting of heaven and earth, of silence and remembrance. In the end, Islam in New Mexico is more than a religion. It is a rhythm of life, a balance between the inner and outer, between faith and freedom, between solitude and service. Thanks for watching until the end. I hope it was useful. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.